There should never be a hierarchy of which life-shortening vice is better or worse than the other. It's honestly the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam, and I hope you're all having a great week. And if you are, I hope we don't ruin it with today's ridiculousness. If you are new here, and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and make sure you never miss another upload from me. Hang on a second. For today's video, I feel like we've got to set the right tone. Hang on, just hold on one second here. Welcome to the ultimate fighting showdown. In this corner, weighing in at a total that's likely more than a small hatchback car, the undefeated kings of comfort food, the Fat Men. And in this corner, weighing in at 600 pounds of pure determination, the champions of sculpted shoulders and chiseled calves, it's the Fit Men! For centuries, philosophers and fast food enthusiasts have debated, is being fat a choice? Today, Jubilee has brought these warriors together to duke it out and settle this once and for all. Or will they? While these warriors aren't actually going to physically duke it out, Jubilee did bring them together to see if they could find a middle ground between fitness and fatness. Let's check it out. First, before we get into anything else, I just have to share that I was today years old when I realized that this is what Coach Greg's real voice sounds like.
Healthy is more attractive than being fit and healthy. How is this possible?
When I heard this, it was the first time that I heard him not sound like Seymour Smoke.
Who are you?
Seymour Smoke, smoke detector.
If you're a child who grew up in the 90s in the US, just unlocked that core memory for you. If you're not, I seriously hope that he does not haunt your dreams. I am so sorry. But seriously, I wish Coach Greg would just talk like this all the time. His real voice is just so lovely on the ears. Get it, Coach Greg? Alright, just for some background before we get into this, in case you've never watched a Jubilee video before, because I sure hadn't, the way that they set these up is they have a moderator who's there, and they've invited people to come in and talk about these specific topics. And what the moderator does is have everyone stand in the back of the room. He asks a question, and if they agree, they come and immediately sit down to answer why they agree. And if they disagree, they're invited to come to the table just a little bit later to add to the conversation. The purpose of all of this is to bring opposite sides of an argument together to see if they can find the middle ground. And I think for this video, rather than giving you a play-by-play of each prompt, because we would be here all day, what I'm going to do instead is focus on the individuals who participated and try to highlight some key moments that I thought they had, or some key points of the conversation. I don't know these creators, and I'm not endorsing any of them outside of what I've seen from them in this piece alone. I feel like that's important for me to say because sometimes you don't know if other creators are really terrible people. So there's that disclaimer. I also want to let you know that I am aware that there's one voice in this thing that attempts to dominate much of the conversation. Don't worry, I'm not cutting him out. I'm just saving him for last. So I hope you'll stick around because things are going to get a little weird. Now, since I think so many of you are going to recognize Coach Greg, just based off YouTube analytics because it tells me who you all follow. Weird, I know. I'm going to go ahead and focus on Coach Greg first. Because what interested me about him is that he always jumped to the most extreme versions of fatness to make his answers.
When I see somebody who's 500 or 600 pounds, all I can think of is, why do they care so little about their health that they can do this, allow themselves to gain that much weight, knowing it's taken 20, 30, 40 years off their life? I just can't imagine not wanting to live that badly.
And, alright, I'll give it to him. It's somewhat fair because this was the first question, and he'd not been sitting in the room with these other gentlemen for a very long time. So we're going to let him roll with that one. But later, when he was asked if fit men were more attractive than fat men, he again jumped to the most extreme version of fatness.
There might be 1% of the world that there's something wrong with them that might think that, yeah, you're 600 pounds, it's so hot, I love that.
As I watched this, I didn't think the facilitator was asking whether or not a 700 or 800 pound body was attractive. My more immediate thought is that I wished he would look at the people who were in the room sitting directly across from him. Because if you look at these men, they are each attractive in their own ways, and there are people in the world who are going to find them attractive. Now, of course, the trick to this question is, are they more attractive? But it's kind of a trick question, right? Because attraction is not one size fits all. Not one of them was the version of fatness that Greg kept jumping to. And in my opinion, it felt a little bit like he had to kind of disengage and disconnect from the people who were sitting across from him to try to make his points. It almost made it seem like he was worried that maybe his points wouldn't stick. I did learn a lot about Coach Greg in this piece. For example, I've only really known of him for about 2 years. I didn't realize that he was no longer bodybuilding, and I also didn't know that he had stopped lifting heavy due to an injury. But within this, and as he's talking about his use of steroids, he does get a little bit into it, a little vulnerable, and he talks about how he just kept pushing himself further and further into unhealthy habits because he was getting positive rewards out of it.
I do not think so. I think I'm one of those 1 in a million cases that was able to do what I do and actually got the success that I got. But if I look back and I'm really honest with myself, I regret doing these things. I was natural world champion and I was breaking world records natural, so I had the records, but I wanted more. I wanted more glory. I wanted more people to say, you're cool, we like you. And so I ended up taking steroids. I did that because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be sponsored. I wanted a pro card. I wanted to be famous. And it worked. At what cost, though? How healthy am I really?
But when Tevin shared something similar, talking about being afraid of losing his followers and his brand deals because his whole brand had kind of been built off this positive reinforcement of negative behavior, Greg didn't empathize with that and instead jumped immediately into telling Tevin and the group that obese people just being in public was promoting obesity.
Do you think just being in a fat body and being in the public space encourages obesity, just flat out?
Yes.
It was such a weird choice, in my opinion, for him to do this because, once again, what we're seeing is that the men on the fat side were relating to what he had just said. And that experience of being rewarded for bad behavior and the way you get a dopamine hit off of that reward. So you seek the reward more and more. It was a direct comparison, in my opinion, and Coach Greg, again, just like 180'd away from it. He avoided directly addressing their points and their questions. And to me, I mean, that's a defense mechanism, right, to finding this middle ground, is realizing that there's some similarity in the two things that they just talked about. Now, Tevin was one of my favorite people in this whole piece. He was so cool and calm and collected. He also wasn't afraid to share his insecurities and address his own issues in front of this group. A key moment for me, again, is when Tevin shared that story of being afraid of losing his brand deals, but also a story about how when he started to seek weight loss, a few of his friends blocked him.
When I expressed the desire to lose weight, another plus-size individual that I used to be friends with was just like, well, I don't feel like I can share your content because I'm not sure how my followers are going to perceive this. I think it might be triggering for them.
That really struck a chord with me because it really related to a lot of what we're seeing this year and a lot of what we've talked about on the channel already, which is where fat creators or fat influencers are wanting to do things to improve their own health. Those things result in weight loss, and then they're being isolated or exiled from the online community that they'd found and that they've built. We're seeing this over and over and over again. They're being targeted by their audiences, by their peers, by brands, simply for wanting to improve their health and potentially lose weight. And the only reason I wanted to highlight this, as I mentioned, we've been talking about it a lot on the channel, is that you don't often see this talking point coming from the male perspective. So I thought that this was really nice that Tevin was able to talk about this from that perspective. For me, though, Tevin's real shining moment was when he talked about how he's choosing to focus on his health. And when he was asked if he would want to look like the men on the fit side, specifically like Coach Greg, he responded like this.
So if you could snap your fingers and look like any of us, would you not do it? Like, would it not be worth it?
I probably choose to look like Tyler. I want to go to a place where it's comfortable and it's healthy all around.
So I feel like you would switch sides if it meant doing it naturally. Like he's obviously natural,
like,
he's natural.
That's what I'm saying.
Obviously not.
I would switch sides if it meant that I could do it in a healthy way. And I mean, obviously, like I expressed it, I'm working on that.
And I absolutely loved this because honestly, again, in the context of fat activism online, where people are targeting other fat creators and saying, well, you just want to be thin and everyone's taking Ozempic because they want to look the same, we're hearing Tevin say, that's actually not true. What I want to focus on is making sure that I can function in my body. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not trying to look like a toothpick. I'm not trying to look like these jacked men. I just want to be the healthiest version of myself. And I loved every second of that because it's so real. I absolutely adore Tevin. I like his self-awareness here, and I am wishing all the best for him. Another favorite for me was Zach. And I'll be honest, when Zach first walked out, I did not think that he belonged on the fat side at all. Like, he's just a very tall, thickly built, good-looking man, in my opinion. Now, much like Tevin, Zach shared that he is actually a big and tall model, and that despite the work that he does, he's always shocked when people comment and let him know that they think he's a good-looking guy. He mentions, kind of like Greg did, that he feels rewarded by these kind of interactions, but not in a way that makes him want to gain weight. He mostly fears that if he starts to lose weight, he'll start to get negative comments or negative traction online. So he's essentially sharing that any negative feedback that he gets on his platforms makes him question whether or not he should maintain his current weight or lose weight for health reasons. Now, at this point, I've decided I'm not going to talk about everyone because a few of the guys on here, they just really didn't have a lot to say throughout the whole thing. It doesn't mean that they weren't impactful when they were talking, but I just think it can be covered by the other key points that I've noted. But we do have to talk about Eric, who I've noted in my notes as orange tank top guy. Eric is the best person in this whole thing, in my opinion, because he came straight out of the gate with empathy and just care for his fellow participants.
Yeah, so the reason I disagreed, especially when I heard the statement, I don't think I'll ever look at somebody based on their situation and think that I'm disgusted. Like, if I see somebody that's a drug addict on the street that's homeless, I'm not disgusted by that. If I see somebody that's incredibly overweight, I'm not disgusted by that. Do I think that there's an opportunity for growth? Do I think they've been put in a disadvantageous position that's probably makes it harder for them? Absolutely. I think I'm kind of an empath, so when I see somebody, I know that there's things underlying.
He also just listened so intently and asked such great questions. He also wasn't afraid to get vulnerable, and when someone asked him a really hard question about whether or not he was using steroids, he admitted that he was. What I really want to highlight from Eric is his response to being asked if the fitness industry makes things overly complex and if they can be toxic.
Like, there's so many images online of people that post in like the best lighting with a pump. That is the societal norm of like what's good, and it even like affects me because I'll see people and I'm like, oh, I look like garbage compared to that. I think that right now it's like there's a lot of, you know, misinformation online when it comes to like how to get fit, how to stay in shape, and a lot of people are monetizing it. These like crazy fad diets, like you can't eat certain things, carbs are bad, you know, fruit has sugar in it, so it's gonna make you fat. So like now food is almost being weaponized, and then to be monetized so that you buy their ebook to tell you the exact secret, you know, code in order to lose weight. So fitness is an industry, right? So people are incentivized to say whatever that is to make money.
And I'm gonna be honest here, I did have a little chuckle to myself as I was watching this, and he's talking about how influencers will make it so difficult and so hard, and you have to follow this special thing that they're trying to sell you, and then they sell you the product. While Coach Greg is sitting right next to him, knowing full well he is selling not only a book, but also a $200 cookbook that you should follow because his process is the best process, just like other fitness influencers. Overall, Eric just came off as the actual gym rat dude who would help anyone in need in the gym, who would answer any questions, who would help someone out. And I just absolutely love that about him. All right, the time has come, the moment you've all been waiting for. We could not talk about this video without addressing the disaster that was Myron. Unlike all the other contestants, Myron was just awful. Like, you could see the whole entire episode, he was not actually listening to anyone. He did not come to find a middle ground. He wanted to talk, and he wanted to talk over everyone, and he wanted to be very loud and very wrong. And Jubilee gave him that opportunity. I knew he was going to be problematic from the start when he said this.
You deserve to be bullied.
And this.
You deserve to be depressed if you're fat. I mean,
I'm going to just counter that with one simple and swift statement. All human beings are valuable, and no one deserves to be bullied. Period. Here's the thing for me, because I know Myron has followers, and a lot of his followers think that he's being honest and straightforward. But Myron was not speaking truths, and that is evident when you watch this, because he was just talking all over the place and then immediately contradicting himself. I first flagged it here.
is because it's unattractive, it's unhealthy. Until we had this woke era, they used to put like models and attractive people on the cover of magazines that were in shape. Why? So that people can aspire to look like that. And it's healthy and it looks better in general. You look good, feel good.
Now, I don't know what world he was living in, but the people they used to put on magazine covers were also not healthy. Like, I'm pretty sure there are interviews of these overtly thin models talking about how they didn't eat and how they smoked cigarettes to keep their appetite down. So what version of health is that? But I guess I shouldn't be too surprised by his hypocrisy, because he also said this.
I think it's important to also acknowledge that like there's abuse on both spectrums, right? Like you can be a fat ass on one end and say, I'm going to just continue to eat cheeseburgers and put on TikTok. And then there's the other side where you can, use performance enhancing drugs and say, I'm going to step on stage. But I would make the argument that the person that is training, using PEDs, etc., I'd respect that individual more than the fat ass. And the reason why is because though it isn't healthy to be on performance enhancing drugs, you're still pushing your body to a level that most can't, versus by just being fat, that doesn't take any skill or dedication.
Greg, in this same sitting, had just expressed that using PEDs were extremely unhealthy for him, and that it had cut years off of his lifespan. And then Myron jumped in to say, well, that bad vice isn't as bad as the vice of being fat, which is just ridiculous. All bad vices are bad vices, and no one is any more or less deserving of basic humanity because of a vice that they have. There should never be a hierarchy of which life-shortening vice is better or worse than the other. It's honestly the dumbest thing I have ever heard.
Mr. Madison, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Another major contradiction that he made was when he agreed with Eric that there was too much misinformation on the internet that makes it difficult for people to help themselves, and then immediately blamed fat individuals for being too stupid to find the right information. I guess if I had been in that room, my immediate follow-up question would have been, okay, Myron, so you're agreeing that there's a lot of misinformation and overcomplication that makes it really hard for people to find the information. But then your immediate response to that is to go ahead and tell people to do their own research. So then why are you surprised when they're finding the misinformation first if there's so much of it? It doesn't make any sense, my guy. And I really can't decide if he believes what he's saying or if he's only saying it for a paycheck. Then, as if we didn't all hate him enough already, he felt the need to just go ahead and say this.
But the reality is we live in this crazy world where we coddle fat people, we coddle idiots, we coddle morons, and we don't hold anybody accountable, and we allow mediocrity to strive in the West. And I think we need to go back to shaming fat people. We need to go back to making fun of them. I mean, if I was president, hell, I'd put all of them in a fat concentration camp so they can concentrate on dieting and exercising, because being fat is completely not acceptable.
Pardon my language, but what in the actual literal fuck is this? And why did Jubilee allow this on their platform? I sat through most of this wondering why the other 7 men in the room were not immediately jumping in to shut down this man-child who is just spouting all of this random, weird, inappropriate information. You could tell that as his peers, as other males in the room, they were extremely annoyed by his presence and the way he was bringing these things up, but they never actually jumped in to stop him. And I don't know if they weren't allowed to do that, if they had to try to like keep the peace, probably as set by Jubilee. But this whole time I was like, you guys, like, why are you letting him just say these things to you and about you? Like, that didn't make any sense to me. And then this is just wildly unacceptable. It's extremely disrespectful. And I think the thing that tickles me the most about all of this is the way he has said this thing and the way he said over and over again that shame should be brought back because shame motivates people. Well, sir, if someone was about to take you and put you in a camp and take away your bodily autonomy, how would you feel about that? Because I have a feeling that you're not going to sit down and take that quietly. So why would you expect that of other human beings who do actually have their own autonomy, whether you like that or not? There were only 2 points when Myron was on my screen that brought me just sheer joy. The first was when I listened to him talk about how shame should be brought back, and then watching his reaction when he was called the smallest dude in the room.
On the flip side, what if I turned around and I did the same thing to you? You're talking about how fit and stuff that you are, but you're over there and you're smallest compared to these other guys. So how does that feel if someone...
And then again, when this moderator who was not doing a lot of moderating had finally had enough of his grandstanding.
It's abundantly clear what you think. We've got it.
Kudos to you.
All I kept thinking about was how it took way too long for someone to step in and make it stop. He was so wrong and so loud throughout this entire thing, and I honestly cannot believe that Jubilee just allowed this to happen on their massive platform. Like, it's massively irresponsible for them to have done that and for this to still exist on the internet. Finally, a thing that I caught right at the end, because I'm a weirdo and I pay attention to weird things, is that you can kind of see that everyone's standing up and they're shaking hands and kind of thanking each other for the conversation, but not Myron. He just awkwardly stands up and walks off screen to God knows where, just ignoring everyone else. And I just have to let you know that the comments on this Jubilee video left me in tears, with one person writing, at the end of the video, Myron immediately got up and walked away, got in his Cybertruck, and called his mom crying and complaining that people don't like him. Another wrote, they couldn't get Andrew Tate, so they went to Planet Fitness and found the guy who would give unsolicited advice to girls doing lat raises. And yellow tank top dude is what Myron thinks he is, when in reality he's just a high school bully who never grew up. It restored my faith in humanity a little bit to see that people were immediately recognizing en masse that Myron was just absolute trash. Jubilee created this video to explore whether or not being fat was a choice. There were parts of this conversation that were so constructive and a great reminder to anyone who watched that health and body image are very personal journeys for people, and that no one should be bullied into changing themselves for someone else. For me, it's just unfortunate that they included someone like Myron, who wasn't actually there for conversation, but rather just to be offensive and disrespectful. He distracted from the overall goal of this video, and ultimately contributed nothing, except to let people know that there are genuinely terrible people who exist in the fitness space. So I guess I'm left, probably like many of you, if you've seen this video, just reminded that there are good people who do exist in the fitness space. They are out there, and they can be voices of reason, despite the fact that there are people like Myron on their side of the fence. The same way that for these men on the fat side, they were being logical and rational and focusing on health. They were not spewing fat activist talking points. And it's a great reminder that the radicalization of either side does not mean that the whole is like that. You might have to dig a little bit. You might have to look past people like Myron to find people like Eric or Tyler, and you might have to look past people like Marissa Matthews to find someone like Zach or Tevin, is a great reminder of that. There are moderate voices on both sides. It just sucks for the fitness side that you might have to weed through the Myrons to get to the Erics. Alright, that is all I have for you all today. At this point, I am curious to know what you think. Have you seen this video in the wild? Did you watch the whole thing? What did you think about Coach Greg using his real voice? Did anyone stick out to you? Were there any highlights that you really, truly enjoyed? I am curious to know. What did you think about the disaster that was Myron? I had never, ever heard of Myron before, and now I'm just like, well, that's dead to me. I'm not going to look into him because he seems like he is just completely off the wall bonkers. So if you've got other funny stories about Myron, I would love to hear them, because genuinely those comments on the bottom of that Jubilee video, they made my life in a way that I was not prepared for. I got genuine joy out of watching people roast that man. And for all my introvert friends out there who may not feel comfortable leaving your opinions in an internet comment section, I see you, I feel you. Go ahead and leave me some sort of like flame or fire emoji, because this whole thing was heated. Plus, I love seeing your emojis just as much as I love reading those opinions, so do leave them for me in the comment section down below. As always, thank you all so much for being here with me this week. I will see you in the next one. Bye!